interrupt the Peppy Seltzer Classical Hour with this bulletin from the WPOD Newswire. Dateline, Chicago. Dwarf detective Billibob Baddins knew being hired by Chicago socialite Julia Lessinger to look into the death of gangster Anthony Pretty Boy DeMaio would lead to trouble. Since taking the case, he is tangled with Bugs Moran's muscle, been suspected of involvement in the death of numbers runner Benny Roletto, paid a visit by rival socialite Ava Rothschild, also interested in Billy's services, and finally has discovered one of the 9 talismans of Acryonis, the Singing Sword, is lost somewhere in Chicago. Still, Julia agreed to top dollar rates. He couldn't say no. Now, after sharing a private dinner with Al Scarface Capone, Billy wished he had. And now you know the story so far. We return you to our regularly scheduled programming here on WPOD Chicago.
Chapter 9. Any Friend of Lou's. The best after-dinner mint I could think of after my face-off with Capone was a long, hot shower. My clothes reeked of garlic, along with traces of pipe and cigar. Not a sweet-smelling combo. After a soothing moment under the warm water, I decided to make the shower cold to counter my adrenaline rush. Shivering under the bombardments of frigid droplets that bit into my skin like a swarm of flesh gnats, I confronted the reality of what I had just stepped into. Just what I needed. A good old-fashioned slap in the face. My fast wrinkling fingertips passed along a trio of permanent welts, starting at my lower back and abruptly stopping just short of, well, where a human's kidney would be. The cold water was turning them a darker shade of pink, making them look a lot nastier than they were in truth. Still, on certain days, usually before a snowstorm, I still feel a tingle from them. I felt that same tingle now, the sensation taking me back to a battlefield and a thunderstorm with rain as cold as the stream I was standing under. A few years before the big mission for the 9 talismans, the Black Orcs had overrun a number of elf villages along the border realms, and we were called in to take them back. As far as the elvish intelligence, in all their infinite wisdom, reports went, the Black Orcs had not yet discovered the libraries in the villages of Erin's Harbor, Chi-Ya-Na, and Ahargo Point. The elders kept many of their more powerful spellbooks in these 3 villages, making them very strategic territories. Fortunately, what the Black Orcs have in strength and ferocity, they lack in brains. In other words, we had time on our side. Fighting orcs is a lot like facing off with Capone or Moran and their boys. You go in with a simple strategy. Hit these bastards with everything you've got. We planned a full charge on these border villages, starting with Chi-Ya-Na, because their library's spellbooks would prove to be the most dangerous if read by the wrong set of peepers. I was fighting alongside this human by the name of Kev, a swordsman with whom I had 2 big things in common. We both enjoyed an evenly matched fight on the battlefield and a passion for our favorite weapons. Kev took his broadsword technique seriously, often needling me with his remarks that a battle axe was best used for chopping wood. I always fired back that broadswords made for great back scratchers. So we made a bet before this great push. Whoever killed the most orcs would buy the drinks afterwards. We kept score during the fighting, and Kev could not help but be impressed by my numbers. I'll admit I was having a particularly good day. My battle axe was cutting down orcs like wheat at harvest time. We remained neck and neck through most of the battle, the rain showing no sign of letting up. The bad weather was actually driving us harder, I think. By now, I had taken down my 20th orc, and was really getting into the love of the kill. so I started to showboat a bit, twirling my axe in one hand or swinging it around my body before striking an oncoming orc was for no one's benefit other than mine. This showboating would normally get a laugh from Kev, but I didn't hear a lot of anything going on right then outside of my own private euphoria. As my axe hit orc number 25, I felt a guttural cry tear through my throat, already tasting the beer that would be free all night. That was when the axe disappeared. It just wasn't there anymore. By the fates, how could I be disarmed? This made no sense. I was unstoppable. I was untouchable. I was wide open. The axe was still lodged in the fat orc's gut. He was losing plenty of blood, but he hadn't lost all of his fight. With a single turn of his torso, I'd lost my weapon. And after that, this weird tingling swept across my side. I remained on my feet, suspended by sheer will and perhaps a hint of fascination that this dimwit had actually disarmed me. Kev's scream sounded as if it were coming from a million leagues away as he buried his broadsword into that beast's chest, his grace reminiscent of Hack Wilson diving for a high flyball and catching it tight in his mitt. There was a slow fluidity to Kev's movements that was just beautiful to behold. By the time the hilt reached its chest, the orc dropped hard into the mud. So would I. I don't doubt our simultaneous drop looked like a pair of marionettes after their strings were cut. I was now aware of the rain, because the drops hitting my face made me wince. When the thrill of the kill finally faded, I noticed the orc's claws. Now what was an orc doing with claws? After staring at them a little longer, I eventually figured out the claws were his weapons. Metal gauntlets with fingertips filed to fine points and edges, capable of doing some damage. Then I looked down to my side. It all came to me in that moment. Pain, awareness, anger. Yeah, anger. I could not believe how stupid I had been. Hard to believe that wasn't even 10 years ago by this realm's calendar. The Great War of the Races had been going on for so long, it was easy to lose track of time when it came to battles like those. Yet that particular memory remained crystal clear, leaving me to wonder whether these goosebumps covering my skin were coming from the cold or this unscheduled journey back into my past. I retraced my scars, tasting the icy water as it trickled from my head, down my temple, and eventually into the corners of my mouth. Those scars were a reminder of how dangerous having an attitude can be. I'd gotten lucky that day, and I was even luckier tonight. Those scars also reminded me of friends like Kev. Damn, I wonder what that big blonde knucklehead is up to these days. The towel didn't do much to warm me up. Bad news for my mason stones, which had shriveled up and were making the walk across the flop a little uncomfortable. I crawled into bed, letting the warmth of my blankets bring me down from my rush. Silently staring at the ceiling, my eyes followed a hairline crack that began at the light fixture and disappeared into the shadows. I must have followed that crack back and forth 100 times. Better than counting sheep. I still couldn't believe I'd managed to con safe passage out of Alphonse Capone's lair, after entering a pact with him, no less. If Capone and I had been talking about a shipment of booze or gambling profits, I wouldn't be taking a shower. I'd be taking a nice long bath in the Chicago River. What I had going for me, my upper hand on Capone's battlefield, if you will, was knowing his unknown. He knew guns and knives, sure, but swords? Maybe he read about them in storybooks, but something told me he didn't spend a lot of time in the tomes. Nevertheless, he was smart enough to know that he was in need of an expert, and one look at me in the newspapers told him that I was his man. For years I had resented being a dwarf in this realm because I was out of place and disadvantaged everywhere I went. Tonight, it saved my ass. Gradually, the thoughts and recollections of the evening faded save for one. Somewhere in Chicago, the sword of Acryonis waited for a wielder. A true wielder. Benny's crime scene was a rock dragon-sized clue that a worthy opponent had gotten his mitts on it all right. However, the lack of similar deaths since then left me to wonder if the sword was up for grabs again, or if its current keeper was having trouble controlling its power. One thing was clear. Once that magic was effectively harnessed, it would be anyone's ballgame as to what would happen next. I hadn't found anything in my world book yet about just how meek you had to be to command the sword, or how exactly the sword would call upon the forces of darkness. Only flowery allusions to what it would leave in its wake. Like I really needed reminders. Tomorrow, my world book was going to stay in its hiding place. I needed to walk the path of captains and corporals who wanted to be kings. Nuzzled deep in the south side was this hole-in-the-wall Italian bistro, widely considered to be the only place in Chicago for a cappuccino. Now, I like a strong cup of Java just as much as the next guy, but this stuff reminded me of the venom that marsh slugs spit on unwanted intruders. These crazy Italians were drinking it to get a swift kick in the ass. There was nothing unique about this little family-run shop. Traffic in and out of this coffee shop was steady. The suits coming in and out were all in a hurry, and I didn't note a lot of friendly chit-chat going on between the customers and crew. There was, however, a check mark next to this place in Benny's memo pad, which is why yours truly was there, to check it out. Enduring the usual round of stares, I hopped up in a chair and perused the modest menu. The menu was in Italian, so I just pretended to know what it said. Meanwhile, I felt myself waking up just from the fumes of the cappuccino wafting in my direction. A hefty Italian mama fixed her beady little eyes on me. "Little man, what do you want this morning?" Blunt, to the point. Something to be said about these Italians. "Never been here before, ma'am." "Ah, the Baddins charm, at work so early in the morning. Damn, I'm good." But my friend Benny loves the coffee here. On dropping that name, I held her undivided attention, even with the hustle and bustle going on around her. "He described this kind of coffee he got here," I went on, "but I don't think I'm awake enough to pronounce it. It's, capu..." She nodded. "Yeah, I know what you want. I'll make it for you real nice." I watched Mama with a falcon stare as she muttered something in her native tongue to a kid standing next to her. Probably some second cousin or nephew trained to jump when this battle horse whinnied. Mama then ducked into the back room, while this young apprentice worked his magic behind a mechanical cauldron. Now, that's disappointing. Here I thought Mama was going to make it real nice, but then she disappears into the storeroom instead, at this busy time? Then again, even with the bistro as busy as it was, a few seconds is all she would need to tell someone to scram harder than a gnome when slave traders hit the groves. Following this early AM hunch of mine, I slipped off my chair, since it was busy, no one heard my feet hit the floor, and quietly made for the door. Very few alleyways allowed access to the back of this joint, so my time was short. Moving as fast as my little dwarven legs would carry me, I took a pass-through and emerged into a wide alleyway behind the south side shops, a place for deliveries and trash. Along with a few alley cats, I observed crates of different produce stacked behind what should have been the grocery. I caught the scent of fresh bread coming from another doorway, the bakery. Then, with the same effect as downing fire whiskey brewed by mountain crossbloods, I was knocked back a step by a whiff of freshly ground coffee beans. A back door flew open a few feet away, soon followed by the sound of rapid-fire Italian. My big bistro mama was whapping some kid against the back of his head, a kid far too old to be working in a coffee house. Maybe if he were a few years younger, I could see him helping out his mama when the hired help couldn't make it, but his street clothes had seen a lot of hard work elsewhere. Whether that work was legitimate remained to be seen. I didn't understand what they were saying to one another, but I still understood them perfectly. From his shrugged responses to Mama's railings, he didn't see the big deal in a little guy coming into the bistro for a cup of Italian Java, and she wasn't too crazy about anyone asking questions about a dead mobster. It came as no surprise to me that he stayed outside when the conversation and the door came to a close. Yeah, my mother always won the arguments in my family, too. He looked my way, looked down the other way, and then ran. Why do these mooks always run? I removed a lid from the trash can next to me and gave it a good solid hurl. Watching the lid's trajectory reminded me of why I didn't really like discus-style weapons in my world. I'm horrible at throwing anything outside of an axe. Between my lousy release and the ill-timed breeze, the lid sailed up high above him before dropping like a stone. Even so, I was still blessed with a bit of the fate's luck. After landing on its edge, the lid continued to roll fast enough to catch up with my mark, trapping itself between his legs. He fell hard to the ground before skidding to a stop. At the present time, Beatrice stayed snug as a bug in her holster. This guy was not high enough on Capone's food chain to warrant such attention. I wasn't going to give him a chance to get up, though, placing my foot between his shoulder blades and keeping him pinned to the ground. Good morning, pal. My name's Billy. What's yours?
Mario,
he stammered. This is Mario, as in Mario Pezza, a mook from Benny's list I'd never met before. What do you know? A name had survived up till now without a star or a line through it. So you understand English. You speak English too?
Well, yeah, I'm an American. What do you think I'm going to speak, French?
I gave a chortle of approval. Finally, an Italian who bleeds red, white, and blue. Smart boy, but not so smart that you couldn't say no to Benny Roletto. The kid groaned and looked down the alleyway. I could see in his face his longing to have been just 2 steps faster.
Benny told me he had a lot going for him.
He finally got out.
He said I could have a piece of the action if I helped him out.
And how are you, not even a 2-bit hood, helping him out? Mario moved as if to get up, but I pushed my heel a little harder in between his shoulder blades. He sank back down into the alleyway asphalt. Well, he just said he wanted to get a piece of Benny's action. Now, just like Benny, Mario was getting a good back alley grilling from the Griffinos kid. He couldn't say his mentor didn't deliver on at least one front.
There was this package Benny had.
He reluctantly began.
Said it was important. Said we had to keep it moving at all times. So that's what we did. Benny, he'd call me. He'd call me at the bistro, let me know when and where, and then we'd make the switch.
Well, ain't that a cozy arrangement? I lifted my foot off Mario's back and hauled him up by the cuff of his vest to a sitting position. The shove I gave him against the brick wall was a reminder not to try and make another run for it. Now how about you tell me who's we? Are you talking like the royal we? Think you're the heir apparent to a throne or something?
Nah. Just ain't a single-man job. I'm part of a crew now. Couple of guys, you know?
I gave Mario another hard shove against his forehead, bouncing his skull against the wall. If I knew that, I barked, I wouldn't be asking, now would I? Are you being a wise guy because I'm a dwarf? Mario looked at me blankly. I gave his forehead another push, his skull knocking against the bricks a second time. I said, are you being a wise guy because I'm a dwarf?
Nah.
No, I snapped, shutting him up. You're not doing much right now apart from keeping out of sight and hoping Capone doesn't come knocking down your mama's door. So just be happy I'm here instead of Capone's boys. Now let's try again. Who is we? This is usually the point of the investigation where I'm going beyond giving out headaches. Right now, I'd be busting up noses or handing out the odd black eye. Just part of the job. Part of the job that, on some occasions, I don't mind so much. But I could see that little Mario here had a bit of the mage in him from the way he was tuning in to all my silent warnings. Weighing the look in my eye, the arched brow, a slight tilt of my head, he knew if he wanted to walk out of this alley without looking like a wild boar's half-eaten lunch, his next words needed to be the ones I wanted to hear.
Just a couple of guys I work with,
he replied with a shrug.
Jimmy Hill, Tommy Ross, some guy I didn't know, Chuck something.
Chuck Morris? Mario nodded.
Yeah, that's the guy.
And let me guess, you all worked with 2 Times and Benny. Suddenly, he went quiet like the good little soldier he was. I don't know if Mario could handle an interrogation from the Black Guard of Hanareth. but he was planning to go the distance with me. This kid possessed a fair measure of strength, stamina, and loyalty. What a waste to dedicate all that to a couple of orc shits like Roletto and DeMaio. Though to be fair, he didn't have a clue that all this loyalty and dedication was to be rewarded with a bullet, with his name on it. Kid, you don't have to worry about ratting anyone out. You're hiding, right?
Mama told me I had to,
he said, puffing his chest out a bit. I suppose that was his way of saying,
I'm a good boy 'cause I listen to Mama.
The truth, though, came out in his face. This poor kid was running scared. Mario was trying to act like the head rooster, but he had probably figured out he was in way over his head.
Word on the street was that Roletto got taken out with the trash,
he added, a slight tremor in his voice now. Got to love the street's grapevine, faster than a hawk flies. So how long has it been since you've heard from any of your pals? I asked.
Well, it's been a while, but I ain't worried about it.
His chest puffed out again as he went paler.
Roletto was telling me the last time we got together I was supposed to get out of town, like the other guys did.
Really? You're the last one in town, huh?
Yeah, Roletto was a little worried when Two-Time was found down by the docks. So he called me and let me know I was going to have to take a powder.
So where were you supposed to go?
Roletto was supposed to pick me up last night after we made the switch. He was going to take me out to some safe house where the guys were laying low.
It wasn't like Benny had lied to him there. The other guys were laying low. You don't get much lower than 6 feet under. Mario, 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 I chided. You're getting mixed up with the wrong crowd, and I don't think your mama will be too happy about that. Bad enough you're working for Capone, but right now ain't such a good time to be known for keeping close company with Roletto and DeMaio either.
DeMaio.
Mario huffed. He shook his head and spat.
DeMaio was just a punk with a nice face who Roletto played for the sucker he was. Nah, Roletto had it figured out. He was going to see this plan out with DeMaio and his partner, whack him and whack him hard, then run Chicago with me and the guys as his generals.
While this kid wasn't dim, he didn't strike me as creative enough to cook up a cockamamie story like this. Benny Roletto planning a coup of his own? It didn't make sense when I was searching his place, and it still didn't make sense. He was the kind of dink born and bred to follow, like most goblins I had the displeasure of crossing paths with. So could Benny, as Mario was telling me, really been playing DeMaio all along? I took a few steps back, giving this gullible kid a little more breathing room. With the new insight he was giving me on Benny and this case, I figured he had earned it. My goodwill gesture was accented by that final touch of my pipe appearing from my coat pocket. Mario didn't move. Finally, he was using that brain the fates had blessed him with. He wasn't going anywhere until I was long gone. You're a good boy, Mario, I said, scratching a match against the bistro's bricks and taking a few deep puffs, regardless of what your mama thinks. He huffed again, but I held up my hand. Look at who you're talking to, kid. It wasn't easy growing up where I did. I did what I had to do for my family. Then when I lost my family and found myself on my own, I did what I had to do to survive. I'm just like you, only shorter. Feeling the full weight of that truth, I took another drag, watching Mario patiently. Too bad you and Benny didn't hook up so you could pass that package on to him. Can't be safe, what with Ness and his boys raiding the warehouses?
Yeah, but the feds are avoiding the speakeasies right now, so I'm...
The poor wop froze as he grasped what I had just pulled over him. He slowly tipped his head back, lightly rapping his head again and again against the brick wall for that slip of the tongue. Between the two of us, he was going to wake up with a severe knot on the back of his noggin. Which one?
The corner of 20th and Clarendon.
He mumbled in resignation.
2 alleyways if you're walking towards 21st. Take the second one. And it's the third door on your right. Password's, I'm a friend of Lou's. And you want to ask for Daphne.
Daphne's your contact.
Yeah. If anything goes screwy, I'm supposed to give her a call.
Good boy, Mario. I smiled warmly, clapping him on the shoulder. So maybe you didn't do as good of a job for Roletto as your buddies did for Benetti. But keep your chin up. Right now, you're better at one thing than all those dinks put together. He lifted his eyebrows from the asphalt and looked me in the eye, mustering up a final ounce of defiance.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
Breathing. I could tell Mario didn't like the fact I was getting in the last word, but hell, what do you say after something like that? This kid just heard he was part of a regime that ended before it truly began. Just as first morning's light slips across the moors, it dawned across his face that he was a living reminder of this scuttled plan to take down Capone. I wondered, no doubt as he did, how much borrowed time remained. The bistro's back door suddenly flew open again, making us both nearly jump out of our skins. In the doorframe stood his big Italian mama with a stone-cold look that could have stopped an advancing army of trolls in its tracks and make them run away. In one hand, she held a cup of cappuccino. When I pulled out a Washington and held it out for her, she broke her stare with Mario and looked at the bill for a moment, almost forgetting why she had the cup in her hand. Finally, she took the bill and I took the cup. Even trade. Setting the cup gingerly on a nearby crate, I then pulled out a Jackson. A few seconds later, the kid was gaping at the 20 I had just slapped into his hand, his brain in his mouth trying real hard to form a simple question. Before you take a long vacation from Chicago, place that on a puppy. Any puppy you pick at any track you visit. You can't miss. I took a sip of the cappuccino and blinked quickly. Damn, this stuff was going to keep me awake for days. You have no clue how luck is your mistress right now. Enjoy it while it lasts. I left Big Mama and Mario in the alleyway. The coffee and the cup it was in paid for with interest. Instead of taking a cab right away, I chose to walk the south side streets, sipping my cappuccino and digesting the latest revelations. As I've said before, Benny Roletto was the closest thing to a goblin that I've found in this realm. Goblins aren't as stupid as trolls, and I've always given them credit for that, but they can barely lace up their own boots without someone commanding them to do so. Many times the orders they get from their orc commanders are,
"Charge ahead of us,"
which they obey with weapons drawn and running full speed into ranks upon ranks of the enemy. Yeah, not the brightest candles in the cathedrals, those goblins. Benny was cut from the same cloth in that he didn't command, he followed. Outside of his daring creativity with the numbers, he was hardly the type to develop a scheme of his own. Oh sure, the guy had dreams of being a big spender and living the lush life, but that would have meant showing some initiative. I don't think Benny could pronounce that word, even if he had a Webster's in front of him. Mario's claims about Benny double-crossing Pretty Boy threw a screw loose in that machine of mine. If it's true I'd been wrong about Benny's waiting for an order personality, I'd been wrong about Benny since I met him. I'm dwarf enough to admit when I'm wrong, but to be this wrong about someone for this long? Like I said, Benny never showed guts of any kind unless it was a sure thing. And apparently, there was something about the singing sword that told him it was a sure thing. He carefully plotted his every move in his journal, everything save for how to stick it to the guy behind the whole operation, Tony DeMaio. I kept flipping through his meticulous notes, looking for any thought he might have jotted down concerning that final hurdle. But nowhere did I come across Benny plotting Tony's untimely death. Still, Benny did seem to understand that anyone remotely involved with this sure thing eventually wound up dead. That didn't seem to throw him. He still planned and plotted. His part of this operation, at least. Could Benny have been in cahoots with another party apart from DeMaio or Capone giving orders? Moran's boys were back in the neighborhood. Their meeting at Mick's was appearing less like a coincidence and more like a quick bite after a meeting with Benny. Was Moran closer to the singing sword than Capone? From Benny's notes and my friendly chat with Mario, I had only 3 leads left who knew anything about the singing sword and still had a pulse. In the past 24 hours, I had enjoyed dinner with the boss and breakfast with an Italian knucklehead who was hopefully heading out for an extended weekend in the country. Guess it was time to have lunch with some dame named Daphne. I sent a quick prayer to the High Warrior. Please, let that girl be alive. When the cab dropped me off at the corner of 20th and Clarendon, I slipped the cabbie a Jackson and told him, with just enough of an edge in my voice, "You never made this fare, and you never saw me." The guy looked at the 20 in his hand and then back to me. "First dwarf I never had in my cab before. I don't see ya. I don't know ya." Chicago taxi service. Nothing beats it. A few minutes' walk later, I found myself standing in the second alleyway just before 21st Street. It was high noon. Not much activity happening there. No garbage men picking up the evidence from last night's revelry. No deliveries. Yet. Maybe closer to dusk, but not in broad daylight. All was quiet for now on this Midwestern front. The closer I got to the door of the speakeasy, the lighter Beatrice felt in my holster. That was my premonition that I was going to need her in case things got hairier than my beard. I stood at the large metal hatch for a moment, my boom dagger feeling light as a feather. I couldn't figure out why. By now the party would have wound down to cleaning up from the night before. If anything, I thought to myself as I gave the door a few good pounds, there's no better time for a working-class dick like me to ask a few questions. I heard the metal peephole slide back, followed by a few seconds of silence, and then another quick, followed by more silence. Like I was surprised. I gave the door a couple more hard hits. On the third rap, the peephole slid open again. "Down here, pal," I called up. Again, I heard the, a little louder and harder this time, followed by the sounds of the door being unlocked from the inside. One look at the guy behind the door explained why my instincts were making Beatrice float in my holster. This troll manning the hatch just stared at me for a moment. I could see those gears turning in his brain, but alas, the motor just wasn't up to Henry Ford's specs. He probably thought, or hoped, that I was just some hallucination brought on by a bad batch of white lightning. He went to slam the door again, but I grabbed it by the edge, and there it stopped. At first, he looked surprised when he found he couldn't close the door on my chubby fingers. No doubt, he thought it was some kind of easy mark on account of my height. Then he looked disappointed, then just plain pissed that he couldn't budge that door 1 inch with me hanging onto it. What a dink.
"Don't you got some circus to be at, shorty? Beat it."
Now, is that any way to treat a friend of Lou's? The troll broke into a gravelly laugh, but his hand was still trying to pull on the door.
"You're a friend of Lou's?"
Yeah, I'm a friend of Lou's and Daphne's.
"Well, who's gone to bed?"
He said, giving the door another tug. The door surrendered a bit, but not enough for him to close it on my fingers. Yeah, he really didn't like me one-upping him like this.
"You don't want to be disturbed, so take a walk, Munchkin."
Didn't these trolls have anything better to come back with? Come to think of it, calling this hired muscle a troll was an insult to trolls everywhere. Sure, trolls were pretty thick in the head, but at least they struggled to say something clever right before eating your face. These mob types never even bothered to try. He leaned forward, placing his head between the opening of the doorway and the door itself, his voice only audible to the alleyway rats and me.
"You still here, Munchkin? I thought I told you to make tracks."
Yeah, I had to give trolls credit. Trolls weren't as stupid as this guy. "I just can't help but look at you, pal, and wonder." He leaned in closer.
"Wonder what?"
"How thick your skull is." It must have slipped his mind completely that he was still pulling on the heavy metal door. When I let go, the hatch came at him faster than a saber-tooth on the hunt. The guy's head was first knocked by the door itself, and then by the door frame. Because both were made of thick metal, the double rap to his temples gave him enough of a hard knock to make him sway back. Then he started coming forward again, and that was when the door, back in my control, slammed hard into his forehead, sending him back into the speakeasy and backwards over the small staircase leading to the main casino. From the hollow sound of his bald skull hitting the floor, I could tell that the carpet was way too thin to cushion the blow. A couple of cigarette and playing chip girls raced past me to check on him, while ahead of me, the bartender reached under the bar to clear the stores if needed. At first sight of me, he moved away from the speakeasy's remaining stock, reaching for what looked like a shotgun behind him. I just shook my head and gave him a little warning waggle of my plump finger, and he got the message. I just took out your muscle with a door. You sure you want to point a gun at me? I could see the bartender think about it, and then go back to cleaning glasses left over from the night before. I glanced over to where my door troll fell. He was down, but not out. Anyone else would have been unconscious if hit that hard with a hatch that sturdy. I was impressed. That Palooka's skull was pretty thick. Turning around, my eyes were blessed with the sight of a sweet little thing in an outfit that would have become part of her skin if she wore it any tighter. The girl was well endowed to begin with, but the bustier she had laced herself in now made her bosom impersonate the thick head of ale poured too quickly. It was hard not to linger on her breasts as she leaned over the lip of the bottom Dutch door, trying to find out what all the hubbub was without leaving her coat check station. It was also hard not to linger because, on account of her leaning, I was eye level with her chest. Damn, I love being a dwarf. Daphne? I asked. The girl's baby blues were radiant, much like the thick mane of flaxen hair falling lightly about her shoulders in ringlets. Unfortunately, the radiance didn't make it to the inside of her head. She stared at me, maybe trying to figure out how a little guy like me could be causing so much commotion. Whatever mill was slowly grinding wheat in that head of hers, it wasn't working hard enough. Not that I minded her hesitation, just meant I scored more time to enjoy the view. This sweet picture of leaning out that Dutch door, which she created so well, was soon ruined with 2 words.
You're short.
Spoken with a voice that could shatter freshly blown glass. My impulse would have been, and you're dumb, but you don't hear me announcing your faults to the world, but I had to think about this one. This was a girl who, every night, squeezed her slender self into this tight-fitting bar wench's getup, probably cutting off what little blood flow she had to her brain, and then spent said evening smiling for hours and saying,
Take your hat and coat, sir.
She was paid for that shelf she called her chest and for looking good. Then it dawned on me. Was this girl completely snow-blinded, or was she smarter than she let on? After all, her job was easy money and presented the potential of meeting Mr. Right and his robust bank account. Fighting my original impulse, I turned my reply around. Actually, I'm Billy. Billy Baddins. I'm hoping you're Daphne. At that, she straightened up and rested her hands on the Dutch door. I could tell Daphne didn't like the fact that this guy, this short guy, knew her name without a proper introduction made. She clearly preferred the penguins with their slick-back hair and expensive colognes, and I didn't have a problem with that. I did have a problem with this girlie's attitude, which was making my job as much of a bitch as she was. Look, Daphne, I'm not going to keep you long so long as we talk like pals and you be honest with me. Otherwise, I'm going to have to come back here at another time. Say, during your shift.
You wouldn't get past the door.
I looked over my shoulder to the doorman, still on the floor. I could see his arms reaching up for a makeshift ice pack the bartender threw together for him. I turned back to Daphne with a wry grin. Wouldn't I? Frowning, Daphne opened the door for me and disappeared into her makeshift office, a tiny table with stacks of cash and an adding machine. I watched her return to her desk in the corner of the now empty coat room, situating herself in as comfortable a manner as her snug wardrobe allowed. After loosing at me an extremely apprehensive look, Daphne hiked up her already short skirt, and I now lingered on her legs, which looked powerful. Even the definition in her calves had definition. With no further regard to me, she resumed tracking different tickets from the previous night's clientele, separating from a rather healthy cash pile the pay going to numerous club employees. A lot of things went down in these keeps of bootleg booze, gambling, and just about anything else the president would prefer not to have in his beloved realm. From the look of her tips, she apparently did a bit more than check hats and coats, and was very good at it. You know something? I spoke over the sounds of her adding machine. For a dancer, you're a real whiz with the numbers there. Daphne froze, the money still in her hands, and I don't doubt she knew exactly what the count was before she stopped. She turned around and looked at me.
You've seen our show?
No, I replied, flashing her an apprehensive nod and smile. But you've got the kind of legs that ladies would kill for and men only dream about. I meant it as a compliment, but her eyes were sharper than any daggers I'd faced in a tavern brawl.
So, because I've got a big chest and nice legs, I don't have a brain?
She fumed.
I'm good with the numbers, and I earn a few more greenbacks for helping out with the cash count. So what do you want, mister?
You can call me Billy if you like, I answered pleasantly as I pulled up my memo pad.
I don't like anybody who knows me, but I don't know them.
This girl was talented. She kept on counting out bills and making notes, never missing a word with me.
So I'm going to ask you one more time, mister, whatever your name is. What do you want?
Well, I just had a chat with a kid who goes by the name of Mario. You know him? Now here's where I wait for the moment's hesitation or fumble, followed by...
Nope, never heard of anyone by that name.
Instead, she kept on working the numbers.
Mario, cute kid. Does a bit of running for us. Yeah, I know him. Real nice kid now that I think of it. Too bad he's poor. I'd pay him a little attention if he had more going for him.
A comment like that gave me pause. That, along with the Louisville slugger leaning against her desk. She wouldn't need a lot of technique to grab a baseball bat and impersonate Big Apple's Freddie Lindstrom if she didn't like the way this talk was going. In the past, I'd been punched in the jaw once or twice on account of looking at the notepad and not at my interview subject. But so long as I heard her working with the numbers from the night, I figured I was safe. This next comment would be the test, though. Mario was telling me you were helping him case some stolen goods.
Really?
She paused in her money counting to glance at the bat for a moment, then over at me.
And you believe that Italian cockroach?
From real nice kid to cockroach. Wow. I'm not saying I believed Mario about you aiding and abetting him in his side business, I assured her, although a girl this savvy should be smart enough to know who and what she was getting mixed up with. Yeah, I don't doubt she knew there was something a little shady about Mario. I'm just saying he dropped your name, and that's why I'm here. I'm just asking you some questions, that's all.
Well, I don't like your questions.
She pushed back a loose lock of blonde hair before returning to the money in front of her.
I don't have to answer them.
No, you don't. I sighed. But you could make my job a lot easier, and you might also get a little something out of it. She laughed at that one.
Like what?
Like another day above ground. That comment made her hesitate. From the way her head turned ever so slightly, I knew she was looking at the two-handed broadsword of Wrigley Field once again. Before she set down the cash in her hands, I spoke up. Now, Toots, you can just calm yourself. That's not a threat. That's a friendly warning I'm giving you. Whatever you were helping Mario with has got some seriously bad maybe magic wasn't the right word to use here. Luck about it. Right now, I've got you and Mario being the only two folks still breathing after handling whatever this hot item is. As Daphne turned around, I felt myself taking a step back. There was something really, really wrong with this girl. I just told her that she was involved with something that left only two people alive, herself and Mario, the really nice cockroach. She didn't seem to care. If anything, she seemed annoyed. At me? I don't know. Only thing I was sure of was this lady was giving me a serious case of the heebie-jeebies.
So, what was this thing that I was supposed to be helping Mario out with?
This time, her grating voice came as a blessed relief. It meant she was willing to talk instead of using me for batting practice. I cleared my throat before speaking, just in case there was any hint of anxiety left there. Daphne didn't need to know she gave me the creeps. It was lifted from a museum, and that's all I can tell you. Mario told me he was supposed to pick it up from you. I'm assuming tonight was going to be the pickup night. He also tells me that you were doing this favor for him and a guy by the name of Benny Roletto. You know Benny?
You mean Benny Tightwad Roletto? Yeah, I know him. Oh, sorry, I knew him. Saw in the papers that Benny is no longer with us.
She shrugged.
No great loss, except for the fact he wasn't bad in the sack. He was fun when I needed to take care of some girlish impulses.
An image of Benny riding this girl like a fine elvish stag popped quickly into my head, and I nearly lost my cappuccino breakfast.
Anyway, I didn't really like the guy,
Daphne went on.
but he did promise me some green if I was to help him and Mario out with the score he pulled off.
Her eyes suddenly brightened for a second as she blurted,
Hey, you're that short guy on the front page of the Tribune, huh?
"Goddamn news hounds." "So, Benny dropped off this score with you," I said, wincing at the recognition. "And Mario was supposed to pick it up tonight?"
Nah, it never happened. Benny called me at home and told me he'd be around and asked me if I would be on the clock that night. Usually I am, so I told him so and he said to expect him. Like he's so important. Well, Mr. Important never showed. The next morning on my way home, I read about him in the papers.
Then, without shedding a tear for her bedroom buddy, Daphne returned to the numbers, adding and subtracting with all the finesse of a crossbreed moneylender. This girl never missed a beat or a dollar bill. "So, I guess you do all right for yourself. A coat check girl and a dancer, eh?" She froze again. This time, she was pissed.
I'm also the accountant.
"You handle the books?" For a moment, I thought she was going to throttle me with the fistful of 5s and 10s in her hand. I held up my own mitts in surrender. "I'm sorry, I know about your women's movement and all, but a dame working as a bookkeeper for one of Capone's speakeasies is just something you don't come across every day. Still, there are stranger things in Chicago. Hell, I'm living proof."
I'd agree with that.
I'll give her a pass on that one. I had it coming to me.
Now, Mr. Private Dick, I would really like to concentrate on tonight's take, so are you finished with your questions?
"Yeah, I'm done," I confirmed, closing my memo pad and slipping out one of my business cards. "I'll tell you what, though. If you think of anything that could help in finding where Benny kept this stolen trinket, or if you feel threatened at any time, don't hesitate to call." I placed my card on the corner of her desk, out of her way, but well in her sightline. She didn't react to it. From the looks of how fast her hands were working, she wanted to get home yesterday. Without so much as a goodbye, I turned around and left her to the night's take. Not a king's ransom, but definitely worthy of an heir's. The troll guarding the door was sitting up now, still holding the ice pack on his head. On seeing me, he went to rise, but then his eyes rolled up into his head, and he returned to the ground with a dull thud and a deep groan. "Don't worry about seeing me to the door, beautiful," I said to his crumpled form. "I know the way out."